Welcome to Deep Look, Ultiworld's weekly radio show about the current state of Ultimate. I'm the host and the editor, Charlie Eisenhood. Joining me, Ultiworld's senior editor, Keith Raynor. And look, club season, it's happening. We got things going on. Teams are playing tournaments. We had some surprising results, to be honest. But we're not talking about that today. Today, we're talking about the World Games. The finals happened on Saturday. The United States beat Australia 13-11 to win the gold medal after losing to Germany earlier in the tournament. Colombia takes bronze in a very hotly contested game against Germany. And Japan, France, Canada, and GB rounded out the rest of the list on the way down in the consolation games. So that is your final standings. And we have obviously a ton to get to today. The United States bouncing back from a really tough performance against Germany in pool play to then defeat both Colombia and Australia, the next two best teams at the tournament in some order.
Against all odds, baby.
To get the win. And, it feels like one of the closest, hardest fought wins we've seen for a U.S. team of this caliber at an international tournament in a long time. Keith, wasn't it just so awesome to watch all these games and the level of Ultimate that we got to see over the course of 5 days?
It really was. I mean, if you are a sports nerd, like this was the ultimate experience for that. Games on throughout the day and everybody focusing on one. I mean, as somebody who follows the NBA, it felt like following a major sport because there was also this kind of coalescing that was happening in the online Ultimate community around these games. They felt important. They were played at a really high level. They were well presented. Shout out to my friend Charlie here for doing a lot of the yeoman's work on that. But it was exciting to have this kind of central event happening in a way that everybody could consume it together.
So we're going to get to a ton of different things here. We've got a couple interviews coming up. We're also going to get to your mailbag questions. So thanks to those of you who sent in mail to deeplook@ultiworld.com, in the Discord, at deeplookpod on Twitter. Lots of ways to get in touch. We always want to hear your questions, comments, thoughts. And so let's just go ahead and dive right in. Coming up, we've got an interview with Edward Stevens, who was on the ground in Birmingham reporting on the event for Ultiworld. He watched every single game. He did not miss a consolation game. He was there dawn to dusk, covering all of these games, and having only one at a time is such a treat. So we'll welcome in Edward once again. We had him on for the preview, and now we'll have him on for the post-mortem. But before we get to that, Keith, we have to talk about Sunset Lake CBD.
Absolutely. Our newest partner, Sunset Lake CBD, is a hemp farm located just outside of Burlington, Vermont. For years, Sunset Lake produced milk for Ben & Jerry's ice cream. And in 2019, they diversified and started growing hemp for CBD. Now, Sunset Lake CBD believes that their farm-table approach is the best way for you to get responsibly produced, high-quality CBD that actually works. Sunset Lake CBD crafts topicals, gummies, oils, and more to help with stress, aches, and sleep. As many of you know, or pretty much everybody who's probably listening knows, I am a new dad. Miles is getting noisy and rambunctious, and being a dad and being a parent can be stressful for us. So there are times when Miles goes to bed and just need to relax a little bit. So I've been happy to have Sunset Lake gummies that everybody who knows me also knows that I am the Ultiworld resident sweet tooth, known for my candy proclivities. So I'm happy to have a gummy form to just take the edge off a little bit, relax me in the evening so that I can chill out on the weekends when we have Miles all day. I love him, but he can definitely inspire some stress. You should definitely check them out today at sunsetlakecbd.com, and you can use coupon code DEEPLOOK for 20% off all products. That's coupon code DEEPLOOK, like the show name, Sunset Lake CBD, farmer-owned, Vermont grown.
I'll tell you what, the ones with the melatonin, money. Okay, you need to get some good sleep. Takes the edge off. That you don't get the weird like grogginess that you can sometimes get if you take melatonin. And the products, we'll show some on the show very soon. I got a box in the other room. I don't want to go get it right now, but beautifully put together, presented. So check it out, sunsetlakecbd.com. Edward Stevens joins us next. Joining us now on Deep Look is Athens, Georgia-based Ultiworld reporter Edward Stevens, who was on site in Birmingham and watched every single game at the World Games. Edward, you've been reporting for a long time. How cool is it to be able to see every game?
I never, ever get to do that. I mean, at best, I can watch 3 concurrent games at a U.S. national event and then pay attention for the semis and finals. And this was on a whole other level of just being able to concentrate and kind of live in the ebb and flow of each game. It was a really special opportunity. And I mean, I know we're about to get to this, but the quality of the Ultimate on display at this event was the best I've ever seen in my life. This was truly special. It was great.
Oh, I'd love to hear you talk a little more about that. Like, we've obviously get a lot of the top players in the world together on these teams. But what do you think? Is it that simple? Is it as simple as having the best players there made for the best games? We've had World Games in the past where it didn't quite feel so elevated. So I'm curious as to your thoughts on why this year seemed so amazingly high quality up and down the teams.
Part of it is the talent on display, and not exactly just the talent, which whittled down to just 14 players. The team there was just absolutely no chaff anywhere on any roster. But so many of the teams, and I would include the U.S. even though the tryout happened way later for them. But so many of the teams, every player had been focusing on being at their absolute peak level of athletic fitness and mental fitness for that moment right when it started. The other thing that set this event above what I've seen before was the universal buy-in across the board from the players about wanting to win. France had a decent tournament. They finished 6th. I spoke to their assistant coach, Nasser Vogel, after their second universe point loss in pool play to put them at 0-3. And he wasn't smiling like, oh, we put a good fight out there. He was pissed. He was like, we didn't come out here to lose games. And or I think of one of the first couple of games of day one was Colombia versus Japan. And there was a practice like soccer field that was set far away from the stadium where the teams would warm up, and then 15-ish minutes before each match they would walk up to the field and set in the player tent ahead of the game time start. And you could hear the Colombian team singing in unison must have been 200 yards away, like clear as a bell, totally locked in on everything they needed to do and their like team identity. It was really cool. I think that level of commitment showed through then in the games themselves.
I feel like our external perception of the tournament and the landscape of it really changed. And it's hard to say maybe you can say which one of these you felt like changed things, or really which one felt like they changed it for the teams. But Germany was obviously the surprise of the tournament. They come out, they beat Canada soundly. I mean, one of the most emphatic victories, if not the, of any team in the tournament. They put it on Canada of all teams. And then they come back and beat the US as well on the next day. Did that feel like it changed how teams felt or were behaving in the tournament? Did it kind of like open up the floodgates like, oh, we can do this?
That is an appealing theory, but I don't think so. I think every single one of those teams believed that before Germany. I think that was just an expression of what the whole field already felt. If that changed anything for anybody, as I think it put some jitters maybe into the U.S., helping into that second game when they came out not looking super great. But yeah, I mean, no, I'm sure 100% that every single one of the 8 teams there went in looking for gold, and they played like it.
Well, let's talk about this USA team. They ultimately win their semifinal over Colombia 13-11. They match that scoreline against Australia in the final. They win gold again. They've won gold every year since 2005, since we've had this tournament. And the thing that's very interesting about this year's team, I mean, even compared to the 2017 team, which dropped that pool play game to Colombia, came back and stomped Colombia in the final. This was a difficult challenge for the U.S. to win this tournament. This was not we had a bad game, but it was kind of a fluke, and then we just cruised the rest of the way. They had real challenge from Colombia, and then they had a real challenge from Australia in the semis and the finals, and of course they dropped the game to Germany. And I think it's fair to say that those were the 3 other best teams at the tournament. How did the USA turn it around from looking like just terrible, honestly, against Germany to coming out really sharpening things up, particularly on defense, but really on both sides of the disc in the semis and the finals?
No, I mean, you said it there, Charlie. It was really defense that gave them the lead early, that allowed them to play with confidence. The way they were able to get hands near Colombia's receivers in that semifinal forced drops out of players you never see drop the disc. I mean, the Colombian team is not a team where drops have ever been a problem. It seems like they play so often and get so much throwing practice, but they got a drop out of Mangi Ferrero, they got a drop out of Jimena Montaña, and they were off to the races. And then the same thing in the Australia match. You know, they got a drop out of Sam McGuckin, who'd been making incredible plays all tournament long early, and they had essentially done that. That particular throw wasn't under pressure, but you know, Kayla Helton was pressuring every throw downfield. Khalif was locking in on the resets. Opie was like hiding out and getting her hands in on everything. I mean, it was a really, really great defensive effort from the U.S. If that's not there, even though their offense cleaned up, if that defensive pressure wasn't there at that level, I'm not sure they would have won either game.
It's fascinating. The U.S. only credited with 1 block in that Colombia semifinal, but that does not tell the story of how good the defense was in that game, particularly early in the first half.
Yeah, I mean, that was a funny game, wasn't it?
It was a funny game.
Yeah.
And it wasn't so funny from the U.S. point of view. They played hard pressure defense, and they were a little more patient with their looks. They still shot deep, but they were much more selective about what they were throwing versus what they weren't throwing, and their clears were more decisive, and their looks back the other way were more decisive, and all of that was good. But I felt like Colombia had a very atypical game, a very unusual game. You know, I didn't see the disc in the hands of Valeria Cardenas as much as I would have liked to. I didn't see, like we saw earlier in the tournament, their men stepping up and running a few like pull plays directly through them to try to keep the U.S. defense on their heels and more guessing. And notably, they only threw 1 huck the entire game. They were living. I mean, they like to play small ball. They like to work in those small spaces. But when you are only doing that, it lets the defense settle. And that's the last thing you want. I mean, it wasn't until late in the second half that Gina Cartagena ran like a pull play that was similar to one the Americans had already run twice in that game and got free, and they got an easy goal out of it. But yeah, it's like they tried to do it the hard way, and I'm sure they want that one back, because they came out and played with a renewed fire to win the bronze against Germany.
Keith, I just
a lot of people
really quick before you jump in,
Sorry.
I just want to point out, I mean, you know, the stats tell the story. Valeria Cardenas had 182 yards of offense in the semifinal, and had 466 yards of offense in the bronze medal match.
Right.
And part of that is the hucking, of course, but she wasn't involved in the same kind of way. And I think she was like clearly the best female thrower at the tournament, and comes away as one of the best throwers, period. And for her lack of involvement, I mean, I think you have to give the U.S. a little bit of credit for the defensive looks that they threw in order to take them out of the rhythm of what they wanted to do on offense, which is exactly how you get a good team to turn it over. And they still only had 6 turnovers in the game, but one too many.
And I think that, you talked about the lack of deep throwing, and something that probably I haven't heard discussed enough was just the lack of impact from Elizabeth Mosquera. And I think that it would not surprise me if she wasn't at full health. We know what she's capable of. Obviously, the polls were still, magnifique, but to cross languages here, but just I go through the stats and she's just invisible. Barely any goals, barely any touches at all. For a player of her caliber to be, to not be able to make an impact for a team which she offers a very differentiating skill set from so many other players. I think that really hurt Colombia, and in particular against the U.S., not having to necessarily dedicate as much of their attention to her as they might have normally, I think really helped them gum up the works elsewhere and kept Colombia playing that small ball style when, a lot of times they want to just move it around and then break out and then find the deep shot.
6 total touches in the semis and finals for Mosquera.
It was so funny because in preparation for this, I had gone back and watched their gold medal game against the United States. Obviously, I couldn't go back and watch the one they won against the U.S. because that footage has, for some reason, been locked in a vault. But I watched the gold medal game, and on the first or second or third point, early on, there's a deep huck that goes up for Sandy Jorgensen, who, as we know, was one of the fastest players in the world then, probably still is. We just don't get to see her as much. And Mosquera closed a gap and went shoulder to shoulder with her. And Sandy still caught the disc, but the way that Mosquera was able to make it close was astounding then. And what was astounding about her at this tournament was that she really didn't do much of that. And Colombia put her on Claire Trope, and Claire Trope was incredible all tournament, but the way in which she won that particular matchup in the semifinals was shocking to me.
What was your perception of the Colombian defense? Because that was the other thing I think I came away with. It's just they were one of the few teams that didn't seem to take the disc away frequently. I mean, they were just content to let a mistake happen, and then on offense they just ran the most efficient offense in the game, except when they played the U.S. and they had a couple of errors. Those reset errors, those confusion mistakes that sometimes crop up for a team that plays fast paced, but against a team playing the level of pressure that the U.S. had, I think maybe it got the better of them. But I just feel like for me, they didn't feel like they were the type of aggressive pressuring defense that we saw from teams like the U.S. and Germany and Australia that made them so successful.
Yeah, it was a different look. Manu played some pretty good defense, was close on a few, and I think got a few. But I didn't see them turn up the heat really until their game against Germany for the bronze medal. That's when you started to see Julio Duque really start to put his best foot forward on defense. That's when you started to see Ivan Alba start playing good defense. That's when Jimena Montaña was actually laying out and making plays close. One of the things I wonder, having seen Valeria Cardenas play both ways for Revolucion at times, and knowing, even as good as offensive player she is, you want her on your O-line, but knowing what a good defender she is. I mean, she doesn't bid as much as Manu, but she can bid as hard. And I wondered that we never really saw her on the D-line at all. It was just, and it didn't matter in pool play.
Right.
Australia was good, but Colombia was almost perfect, so it didn't matter there. And they were way better than either Japan or France overall. No offense to Japan or France, who finished 5th and 6th and both had good tournaments. But it mattered against the U.S. I mean, there were points against the U.S. where Colombia just did nothing on defense, and that was hard to see. You've got to make them work harder there.
Yeah, they didn't get pressure until late. I mean, it felt to me like a game where and I talk about this, for great teams, there's often only one or two games of the tournament that matter. And Colombia was able, I mean, I don't want to say they sleptwalked or anything like that. Like they had to play hard to win these games in pool play, but they were the best team. Their Australia game was very good. But they were the best team. And so you get this one game that really matters against the USA, and they just didn't look ready. They came out flat. They came out slow. They were making nervy mistakes. I think the first turnover was a pass to an open receiver that had a little too much pace on it, and it went off the hand. And it was either a little too wide or a little too fast. And then they were just, what I noticed is that their O-line got just brutally broken, like with pace from the US. Like the US D-line was just like, we're going to go to work on you right now. And they got 3 breaks in a blink of an eye. And it was too late at that point. It was too late. Colombia was maybe arguably the better team overall the rest of the way. They came back in the second half. They got breaks back, but it was too late. They could never close the gap all the way. And it just felt to me...
Sounds familiar.
Yeah, it just felt to me like a team that hadn't been there yet. I know they were in the gold medal game in 2017, but they got blown away, right? This was the first time that they were in a match with a team that they were, I think, more or less on the level with, and they just didn't play that great. And it's now you got to wait 4 years. Well, 3. Well, so only 3. But it was disappointing because they played so well in their other games. But I think you got to give the U.S. credit for how well they played defensively to kind of take Colombia out of what they wanted to do on offense.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. And we saw it again against Australia in the final. The U.S. got ahead early based on pressure and then
hung on for dear life.
Yeah.
Which of these, we just spent a lot of time talking about this Colombia-US game, and I think there are those out there who, you can agree or disagree here. I guess I'm going to ask you to. That was the final. That was the real final, so to speak. Who do you think was the second best team at this tournament behind the US? Or I guess if you think it's the US, you'll make your case.
Well, I think the U.S. was the best team, so I'm not gonna fall into that pit. But the more in retrospect I think about Australia's game planning and commitment to always putting every single one of their players in their best role in the field, makes me think that even though they lost that game to Colombia in pool play, it makes me think that they were the second best team at the tournament in addition to winning the silver medal. Like, I think it was a justified silver medal win. You know, they had a player like Sally, we've been talking about this in our Discord, who didn't have a single touch in the semis or the final, but she was the first one down on the first pull of the game, makes a huge bid to show the US exactly what kind of pressure they're dealing with, has more bids all across the tournament. I mean, she is there clearly to be one of the best defenders on the planet, and she was. You know, Australia didn't get cute. You know, it was like 1 point, maybe 2 points over 2 games where they didn't just center the disc to Tom Tulett. You know, when their defense got a turn and they had Rob Andrews on the field, which they did most of the time because he was doing a lot of the pulling for them. The game plan was somebody pick up the disc and put it to Rob Andrews deep, and that guy was incredible. And I don't know, there's something I appreciate about seeing a team not only where everybody's playing well, but everybody is put in the place to excel the most. And I think that's what I appreciated about Australia. I think they were the second best team at the tournament.
All right, so why did Germany go 0-2 in bracket play and then the bronze medal match after all how great they looked earlier in the tournament?
I think they had shown how reliant they were on offense, on the play of three players in particular, Nico Müller, Anna Gerner, and Lev Kovalchuk. And I know that every single coaching staff out there was watching every other game at the tournament. We filmed them all, so they had a chance to look at them afterwards. And once it was clear how often they were going to try to use Levka in the lane, either under or deep, once it was clear that that disc wasn't going to go to anybody but Müller or Gerner in the backfield, defense could lock in on that. They were super consistent. They had, and it was worthwhile. I mean, Nico Müller led the tournament with something like 23 or 24 assists. Anna Gerner didn't throw the disc into the end zone that much, but she was a rock back there. She was incredible. But if you do the same thing enough times, teams are going to start to look for it. Müller would hit that blow by cut and then throw the inside forehand up the lane. And by the time you get into the medal matches and the semis and the bronze medal match, teams know he's about to do that and will start to put a body and sometimes get a hand on that disc. They're going to start pushing Levka into the handler space if they can, which they did more of. And she's good back there, but she's not going to absolutely kill you back there the way she will if you give her a single inch deep. That's my take on it. I'm sure the German coaches and the other coaches will have much greater detail, but from the sideline perspective, I think that was it. They needed just a little more variety in what they could do out on the field to keep the disc, which is what they did so well through pool play, keeping the disc.
I think I mostly agree with that assessment. I think that the D-line offense maybe lacked a little pop too, because Levka had to pull so much weight doing double duty for them. But really a tremendous showing from them. I guess I'm curious, like, where do you feel like they were the fourth best team at the tournament? Assuming based on what you've said so far, that we have the US, Australia, Colombia. Do you think Germany was the fourth best team? And is it clear, like there's no competition?
I would love to have seen them play Japan or France just because, just to get those data points. I think probably, yes. Germany were really good. I mean, they dismantled Canada. They showed up and made the US look mortal at this tournament, which is hard to do. And yeah, they were good all the way through. I think they were right behind Australia and Colombia, not very far. So I would have loved to see Germany and Japan play. They have such different styles. The Japanese team was so huck happy with those, it was weird. It was different. They would run an H stack and throw these long, flat huck shots much more often than they would do what we think of as a traditional Japanese look, which is get the disc on one side and then run the S cut and hit it with the low blade around in the other corner. But it would have been nice to see, will Germany be able to put their defenders in places to take away those spaces that the Japanese are throwing to? Will Japan be hitting their hucks? Because they missed a lot of them, but they hit a lot of them as well. I think that would have been a really fun matchup. Too bad we didn't get to see it.
Overall, I mean, I think it's fair to say that the general consensus that we discussed here on the show, that the European teams were going to, it was nice that they could be here, but that they weren't going to do much damage was basically wrong. I mean, even GB, who went winless, and, we're dealing with some external circumstances, some people missing for COVID for a couple games. I mean, they were a very competitive team at the tournament. I mean, maybe not with the absolute top teams there, but, they were playing tight games down the stretch in consolation. And then France was good. France was really good. I thought they were one of the most impressive defensive teams at the tournament. Obviously, we saw what Germany was able to do. Overall, the European performance here seems like it was a cut above what was expected. Yes?
Yes, 100%. You mentioned GB. They went winless. I don't know how many people tuned in after, like in the States, tuned in to watch any of their matches other than the one against the United States on day one. But notably, they were missing, they played pretty well in that game. They lost by a big margin, but they played pretty well. They were missing Ashley O and Molly Wedge, who were out for precautionary reasons. I think they'd had close COVID contacts. I can't be 100% sure on that, but they showed up and played the rest of the tournament. They were awesome. They were so good. Um, so yeah, I mean, if that's what the worst team in the tournament results wise looks like, and the other European teams like actually, well, I guess they didn't play France. France had to beat Canada to make it to that fifth place game. But yeah, the European teams were awesome. Germany was great. France was really good. France was an interesting case just because they played the least out of all the teams there through their women on offense anyway. Pauline Berthet was really good on defense, and so were both Eva and Lison Bruno, who are both really young. They're like 19 and 20 or something. But yeah, France were really good. They had Quentin Roger out there just throwing whatever he wanted all the time. In the fifth place game, Mathieu Bosset, I think it was the fifth place game against Japan. Mathieu Bosset went off. He was playing with a lot of swagger out there. He had one goal where he did a little button hook behind the Japanese defense, caught it, and then just like held the disc up and displayed it to everybody for 10 seconds. I mean, these were genuinely good teams. We kind of dismissed them in our preview show, and I regret that personally. I was wrong. Ravi at Eurozone, everybody else, I'm sorry. They were really good. They were awesome.
I came away thinking that those teams are teams that could contend for semis or further at USA Club Nationals, with a little bit of roster fudging to make sure that all the numbers work. But from a talent level standpoint, like, I was very impressed. And I think, I don't know how the European scene connects with these representatives per se, but I think they should be really proud of what they put forward. And certainly they altered how I perceive European Ultimate, and the level of competition that they can bring on an international stage has definitely changed for me after seeing the way that those teams performed. We've talked about Quentin Roger had some insane numbers. I wish that we had the stats from the consolation play so that we could have like a full accounting, because I feel very confident he would have led in yards, maybe by a wide margin. Insane numbers. But who else? We've had many names that have come up in this podcast. Who do you feel like stood out as the most impressive players at the tournament?
We already talked about one with Claire Trope. Claire, I don't think it could be said enough how good she was for the U.S. Downfield, she had some really nice throws as well, but as a receiver, she was unstoppable. The vast majority of the time when she was open, it was by 8 to 10 yards. Nobody was close. And on the rare occasions when somebody was close, she made the play 100% of the time. She was really awesome. Got a shout out Tom Tulett as well from Australia. We saw the absolutely insane reset catches he made, and he made every kind of tough throw imaginable, absorbing a huge amount of touches in pressure games for that Australian team. Those and Brittany Dos Santos. So Canada had a rough tournament. They finished 7th. It was not what they wanted, but Brittany Dos Santos was the only player at the tournament to finish with a double-double. She had 11 assists, 12 goals, and absolutely ran around like she owned the place. She was on another level. She is going to be huge for that Sixers squad, both in USAU play and just this coming weekend for WUC. She was really, really, really great. Those are the few, just the top names at the tournament.
Who do you think had the best overall group of men and best overall group of women? Which team?
Oh, I think the best overall group of men goes to Australia. I think Tom Tulett, Rob Andrews, Sam McGuckin, Alex Shepard, Alex Gann. I know he had those 2 turnovers in the final, but he had a really solid tournament. I think they were probably the top overall group of men. On the women's side, it's hard. I feel like it's neck and neck between Colombia and the United States. And I will give the edge to the United States in that matchup. It wasn't just Trope. Opie Payne and Claire Chastain were great both ways. Sarah Mextroth was on everybody's level pretty much except Trope and Dos Santos as a receiver. And Kayla Helton. Can we talk about Kayla Helton's defense? How much determination does she have to come out there and play 100% every single point the way she did? Blown away. So yeah, I'm going to say the U.S. had the best group of women. It was close with Colombia.
Spicy takes. Spicy takes, I would say. Walking away from this experience, what were your takeaways on the atmosphere of this event, the gravity of the event? What's your takeaways as you finish up here?
Within the teams, the level of gravity in the sense that like it pulled everybody into it. I haven't seen anything higher. I mean, that's the buy-in I was talking about earlier for the teams. Outside of the teams, it took a while for us to get fans into that stadium. It wasn't until the semifinal round that we really started to hear some noise in the stands. But between the semifinal round and the bronze and especially the gold medal match with the U.S. home crowd cheering the team through some very tense moments, it was on a level that I haven't seen in this sport. I mean, those were like, it wasn't the same numbers, but in terms of intensity and being into it, those were like American college football games. Those were like European soccer games. The atmosphere was really electric once the fans were actually in the building on Saturday.
And it's crazy to see a U.S. team be the dominant favorite in the stands. Like, that is not something that happens at international tournaments generally.
Won't happen
again. Not anytime soon. But it's kind of cool. Like, people were definitely into it, and they completely filled the parking lot. The stands were totally packed. There were people spilling over into the kind of just like along the track, along the fence line. The CEO of the World Games, talking to an Olympics reporter, specifically mentioned flying disc as like a big ticket sales success in a newsletter that I was reading earlier today. I'm waiting to get like gate numbers. Hopefully the World Games folks are going to be able to provide that. But I mean, there were, I don't know. It's hard to estimate, but there were definitely like a couple thousand people there. And a lot of them, here's the thing that's most notable. A lot of them were fans, like people from around the South, like there were parents, there were friends, there were other teams there, but I mean, there's not that many athletes at this tournament, right? A lot of times when you go to the World Club Championships, right, they're going to have a huge crowd for the finals of the World Club Championships in Cincinnati in, what is it, about a week and change from now, like almost 2 weeks from now. But that's over 1,000 players in that group. At this tournament, there's 8 teams of 14. So you don't even really have more than about 100 players total, and 2 of the teams are playing in a game. So it was very cool to have like a spectator environment. The only event that I've ever seen come close to that is select AUDL championship weekends, and not all of them are like this. But like Madison, Montreal a few years ago, they've had those moments. And I just thought that was a really cool part of the whole experience, at least for that one game.
It was one of the last things to happen at the entire World Games, right? The gold medal match.
Yes,
my
I think
understanding
it was
was
on the
that because
last day of
basically
competition.
I tried to watch. I was like, oh, I'll go watch some other random sports, and it was like, oh, there are none. We're done. We're at the closing ceremonies. I wonder how much that was like affected things. Is it's like, hey, this is what's going on. Let's get hyped for the end of this thing. But because I could see a couple of what looked like athletes from other sports on the broadcast who are hanging out. But definitely cool to hear that there was a great environment, because I think the athletes deserve it, and it's obviously exciting for us too.
One other note about the environment, and this wasn't specific to Ultimate, but it was so cool to drive into a place that was absolutely taken over by the World Games. I mentioned to somebody when I arrived that, I drove over from Athens, and when I crossed the state line into Alabama, there was a little sign underneath "Welcome to Alabama" that said "Home of the 2022 World Games." And when I got into Birmingham, it was night, and they had the undersides of all the concrete like supports for the interstate junction heading in, all lit up in like sky blue and like pastel yellow and a bright pink and in the World Games colors. And it was so neat to like be a part of some much grander event. Keith and I both share the experience of having grown up. I think Keith was there, having grown up in Atlanta during the 96 Olympics. And this was the first time since then in my life that I've been part of something comparable to that level. It was really awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I flew into the airport, signs everywhere, things on the ground, balloons in the World Games colors. First thing you see when you get on the road, giant billboards. Like, the whole town was thrilled to have this event be there. And then being able to go into the dining hall area where the athletes were having dinner, like, it's just really cool to be in that environment with all these people from all these sports. And, I don't think it's quite the Olympics, but it definitely had the vibe of like just this huge international event. And I thought that was really cool. So I guess, Edward, final thoughts on the experience of covering the World Games and what we've learned about the countries competing there. Maybe I'll ask you this specifically: is the U.S. going to lose this tournament anytime soon, or is it still theirs for the foreseeable future?
100%. Maybe as soon as Chengdu, either that or the next cycle, the U.S. does not win gold. Everybody's too close. The margins are too fine. There's too much potential for 1 to 2 mistakes to throw everything out of whack. The U.S. is going to have one of those games like Colombia did in the semi, where they come out flat early at the wrong time in an elimination game. And yeah, it's going to happen. You know what? I think we have this mistaken impression in the United States, because we've been winning these games, this event, and others like it on the world stage for so long, that we have the best athletes in the sport. We 100% do not. The vast majority of the most athletic players I saw at the event were from the other countries involved. We have the most entrenched culture and history since it was invented here. And I think we probably almost certainly have the widest spread of like availability of playing high level games. But that gap is closing fast, and everybody wants to win this event. And any one of those teams there really could have put it together for a string of 5 games, or lost one in pool play and only had to put together a string of 4 games the way the US did. So yeah, the US is going to lose. It was awesome to watch them play. They were so great this time. They won and they deserved it. But yeah, the US is not going to just keep winning this event forever.
All right. Well, Edward Stevens, thank you so much for joining us. And it was just tremendous to be able to follow along with all the action from the tweets and all your great recap coverage on ultiworld.com.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. Can't wait to do it again.
All right, Edward Stevens with us here on Deep Look. We're going to take a break, and we'll be right back. Don't go anywhere. It's Deep Look. Joining us now on Deep Look is the star center handler for Team Australia at the World Games, Tom Tulett. He had 19 assists over the course of the tournament, and some of them were beauties, Tom. Welcome to the program. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Charlie. Thanks, Keith, for having me. It's good to be here.
So Australia comes away with a silver medal at the World Games. How do you feel about the way that you and the team performed in Birmingham?
I feel pretty good. We set the goal a long time ago of winning gold for this tournament, and obviously we just fell short of that. But within that, you want to see the team play its best games and reach its potential and put up the best fight that the team can. And I really think we delivered on that. And I think that the team should be really proud about how we represented against some of the best ultimate players in the world and the best teams in the world. And specifically in that final, I think the team showed an immense amount of grit and determination to sort of come out of the 7-3 hole that we were at half and against a US team, which is star-studded and just full of awesome Frisbee players that usually in a game against America, we traditionally haven't gone that well. So to do that in a final, I'm just immensely proud and satisfied. And obviously silver's going to hurt for a little while, but at the end of the day,
That you led me right to what I want to ask about. I mean, you're facing a 7-3 deficit against the most successful international program in the world. How do you battle back? What is the conversation like at halftime in a pretty brief halftime? If I'm being honest about the World games, what's the conversation like for the team, and how do you get out of that hole?
For us, it was pretty much the same messaging that we delivered to the team for the previous 24 hours. We always believed that we could win the game, and I guess that belief didn't really go away at halftime. We knew that we had a little bit of work to do, but that was probably resemblant of some previous games that we'd played in that tournament, and we'd come up trumps in those. So yeah, the messaging was we're still in it. Like even though it's a game to 13, they're still long games, especially if they go down to 13-11, 13-12. So we knew we still had time up our sleeves, and if we came out of halftime really strong and played with the defensive intensity that we wanted to be in with a shot. We had the firm belief going into the game and the tournament that we were the best conditioned team coming in, and we knew that we would ride games out really, really strongly. And that's like thanks to the strength and conditioning expertise of our coach back home, Kane. He put in a lot of work, and everyone on the team had a full year on the same program. That we were so confident coming in that each game we would finish stronger. And I guess for us, the final was no exception to that.
I haven't gone back and watched the tape, but having watched from the sidelines during the final, it felt like you were a little bit snake bit to be down 7-3 at halftime, given that you were playing great defense against the U.S. You had some bounces not go your way. Was that frustrating? And maybe I should ask you, is that the sense that you had at halftime that like, wow, it feels like we should be a lot closer in this game than we are?
Probably not. I think we had some pretty poor turns offensively, which really let them into the game. And I guess as a team, we have to take responsibility of that. But I mean, you're entirely right. We're playing some great defense, and they did have a couple of lucky breaks there. I'm not sure if it was first or second half, but yeah, I guess for us, it's just a responsibility we have to take over those early turns, and offensive line not playing, I guess, defense up to the mark to get it back.
Do you feel like it was an advantage having a number of players who've played in North American Ultimate, who've gotten a chance to come over and play? You know, Cat Phillips playing with Sixers, and yourself getting to play a season with Johnny Bravo. Do you feel like that helped you, especially competing against the North American teams that were often considered some of the strongest teams?
Yeah, absolutely. For a couple of reasons, I think individually we can bring home the knowledge and experience that we can match it with those players, and we can share that information with the other players on the team and other players in the country. So the belief of being able to compete against the best players in the world just gets solidified by that. Also, all the tactical knowledge that comes from playing with the different teams under some of the best coaches in the world really helps us, like, in the years leading up to this campaign, and implementing some of that both on like a club and national level has really seen Australian Ultimate change strategy and identity almost, which I think has really positioned itself to be more consistent in games and sort of less run driven, and able to compete more consistently across the board. And I think over the tournament we saw that we were able to possess the disc really nicely, and like sustain that possession for the entirety of a game. And I don't think if we didn't have those players that went across to get those experiences in the US club system, I don't think all of that knowledge would have been imparted, and our systems wouldn't be up to scratch to sort of maintain that level of play in the highest pressure.
Do you think the gap between the United States and the rest of the world has closed?
Yes, I do. I think this format of tournament, especially with the restricted roster sizes, helps identify that even more so. I really liked the 14-player roster size. It means that like all the teams are matched the same, and I think there's a lot of countries in the world that can produce 14 excellent players and gel together a really, really sound team. And I think we saw that in the tournament with how many close games there were, especially amongst the top teams. It was really awesome to see.
So we've talked a lot about the final, but I also want to take a look at the semifinal. You know, you get a chance to go up against this Germany team that was playing so well, was the only team to beat the Americans, and it was an incredibly close game. What do you think gave Australia the advantage in that one?
It's a great question. I don't think I could pinpoint it down to one thing. Germany was playing like a really, really great brand of frisbee across the whole tournament. It was fun to play against. We got to scrimmage them on pre-tour, and I guess we didn't really know what to expect, as this is their first time on the World Games stage. So yeah, I guess that experience, and would have a little bit more of an intimate knowledge of their players and systems. But there was enough film out there that we did a fair bit of study on them. I would say it just came down to the same sort of messaging and belief that we had in our team, rather than being anything external focused there. But yeah, for that game, I think it's hard to put it down to one thing. There was some outstanding individual performances, obviously, in that game. I think Rob probably had the game of his life there, and really helped us get back into the game on the defensive side, or defensive conversion side especially. So yeah, to one thing I couldn't tell you.
Is there a better deep receiver on the planet than Rob Andrews?
Maybe Dave Andrews, his brother. No, Rob's going really, really great, and some of those grabs were just insane. I think he's definitely up there in that echelon of best deep receivers going around, and this is an exciting time to sort of play on a team with him as he sort of comes into his athletic peak. And I guess we'll get to see how he matches it against like a full variety of deep receivers from around the world at WAC. But I guess as we've seen at World Games, he can match it with the best of them. So yeah, he's pretty damn good.
It was fun watching him. I'm glad he got to put up a huck, because I remember watching him play with Sunder back at the last World Championships, and he was just this great defender. And now he's out here. By our count, he had 18 goals, which I think the next closest total was 12, not including consolation play. So I mean, he was really torching defenses, but it was great to get to see him explode a little offensively after seeing what he could do defensively. Now, you were a big topic of for other teams' defenses. I mean, teams were gunning to try and stop you as a central throwing part of that Australian O-line. Who do you feel like gave you the toughest time? Which defense or which defender gave you a real challenge?
Personally, I found Dylan Freechild the toughest matchup. Thankfully, I only had him for a couple of points in the final there. They were rotating a few people through, but I would have had a much more miserable time if Dylan was constantly coming down. I think there was a few out there. Obviously, I think is it Sebastian from the German side? He played some great defense. I had Jet for a couple of points in the Japanese game, and obviously he's lightning quick and impossible to get away from. So yeah, there was some good battles out there, but I'd say Dylan would take the cake. I think Chris was carrying a little bit of a hamstring injury, but he was still giving me a bloody good run around, and that was pretty tough as well.
I've seen a few people ask about this. When you would catch the centering pass, you'd catch it and then you'd give it a good look for like 2 full beats before you looked upfield. What's that all about?
It comes from our club head coach, Cole Fink, who's taking us to WUC. He learned this drill from Mauricio Moore, where the team has to complete 5 minutes of throwing without doing a turnover. And if you did a turnover, then the whole team would start again and you've got to complete the 5 minutes. As a club, sometimes that took us 45 minutes in bad conditions. But part of that drill is that you have to show the team that you've caught the disc. And a way that I do that is having that extended look and trying to catch it with my whole body. So trying to make sure that absolutely nothing can go wrong in that situation. And for me, that pool catching routine is just an extension of that. I know exactly what's going to happen behind me because we've just called the line. I don't need to rush to look upfield to see the cuts developing because I know where they're going to be. It's just about me making sure that I demonstrate the right amount of care for getting the disc into play for each possession. And I guess it helps me center myself and make sure that I'm not getting rattled by any potential defenses that might be coming down or any perceived pressure. It's just me and that one catch for that one moment. And yeah, I just take an extra moment to look at it.
I'm looking forward to like the next generation of Australian handlers, maybe the next U24s or U20s, and they're all just like staring the disc down right into their hands, and they're all like, look, no turnovers in the finals. I think you had 5 turnovers over the course of the whole weekend, despite throwing for like 1,300 yards or something. So if it works, it works. If being connected with the disc and being centered works, it works for you. So it really was an exciting event and a great chance to participate. Walking away from the World Games, like what was your general sentiment on being there and on the experience itself?
Firstly, it's just awesome to be back playing Frisbee at a World Championships again. It's been 3 years, is it now, since the last Worlds, with a couple of cancelled, postponed ones in there. So that in general is just amazing, and it's so awesome to see that the quality of Frisbee has increased over that time and hasn't decreased due to the lack of competition. The World Games in itself is such a unique and awesome event. Just getting to hang out in the village, being surrounded by like such a variety of different athletes and sort of chatting to them and learning from their experiences, and then watching them do their sport is really, really cool. The World Games is just a different beast, and the change in format I think it's been great with the 2 pooled 8 teams. It's still as cutthroat as ever. If you get that early loss, there's a lot of pressure on you. But yeah, the World Games, it's sort of like a mini Olympic experience, really, and it's just phenomenal. And I think Birmingham was so well put together in terms of like athlete offering and the accommodation and food and transportation and all of that was just really top class. And the facilities that we had available to us were awesome. So yeah, the World Games experience is just another step up from that world champion experience.
So you're in Tennessee. You're on your way towards Cincinnati for the World Ultimate Club Championships coming up here in just a couple days. How do you change mindset? This is like a very unusual thing to have these tournaments be so close together. So how do you shift from playing for Team Australia to now competing with your club team? You play for Sunder, right?
No,
you play with
Ellipsis men's, yeah.
Ellipsis.
Yeah, so concluding 2018, I moved down to Melbourne, and the Ellipsis men's chapter of the Ellipsis club started up. So Rob and I will be taking Ellipsis up to Cincinnati, which is exciting. The transition's been quite tough. Like, World Games was always going to be draining, but I think after the run that we put together and how close the final was, I think everyone involved in that team is like quite emotionally drained from it all. So even coming into a new team environment has been tough. I know a lot of people after big world championships like to just hang out and chill out and not get up to much and even just return to normal life. But it's really been, we finished up on Sunday and we rolled straight into team stuff Sunday afternoon. So that's been really, really challenging. Returning to play, I don't think is going to be as hard for us. Like, we're coming off the back of our season and we started this campaign in October. So we've had a lot of touch points with the team over the last 9 months or so. We're almost looking forward to like the tournament starting so we can just focus on that and sort of not how like emotionally drained and fatigued that we are coming into it. So yeah, the last couple of days have seen like a steady increase in like energy and morale for the three of us on Ellipsis. But yeah, we're really looking forward to it, and the boys have been really great, sort of nurturing us back into the club environment and into the pre-tour that we missed a little bit of. We've got a couple of games lined up for the Friday and the Saturday up there in Cincinnati, so enough time to sort of flush the legs out and get just back involved with the systems and that sort of thing. So I think one of the benefits is, like, I think Australian teams do pre-tours better than anyone else in the world pretty much. So rolling straight into another really good pre-tour and having lots of opportunity just to hang out and relax with the team and get some good training and game opportunities in is going to set us up well for success. And I guess there's just the trust that we have to have that will assimilate nicely back into the Ellipsis team environment after the World Games environment.
Are we going to get to see some more hammers, more spicy hammers? I know you pulled out quite a few during the course of the tournament. You got some more in you, or was that the whole supply?
I think there might be some more in me. I think it's much harder to do the longer hammers, especially the hammer hucks in the men's game. Just the field's a little bit busier. It's a little bit more open in the mixed game, and maybe that makes it a little bit easier. But yeah, we'll see where things end up, and I'm sure there'll be a hammer or two in there. That's for sure.
What's Ellipsis's goal for WCC?
We're aiming to win it. Like every tournament, in my opinion, like going in with that lofty goal obviously might set you up for some disappointment and vulnerability there. But we've got a super talented roster, and like we've had 9 really, really good months together. That like if stuff clicks, like things can go our way, that's for sure. And I think that hopefully the competitive nature of the World Games team has really instilled some belief into the team that everyone in Australia can compete at that top level against the top players, and it's all about stringing that together consistently. And I think the boys are feeling quite good about that.
Well, we obviously saw tons of impressive play from Team Australia. Phillips sisters, talked about Rob Andrews, Sam McGuckin, yourself. What are some players from other teams that impressed you at the World Games?
It's hard to go past Anna Gerner and Nico Müller, the handling combination for Germany. Their ability just to keep the disc alive and progress it down the field was absolutely elite. Some of their movements and like dump in front of stack movements were almost telepathic, that they'd throw the throw without even seeing it, and that'd always be there. It was very impressive. In general, watching that German team develop was really, really impressive. I enjoyed the brand of frisbee that they played. They played through their whole team. So playing against them twice was a privilege, and I'm super proud of what that program has done. And they represented themselves really well. I think Valeria Cardenas had a sensational tournament. A lot of our scouting for the third game we played against Colombia was centered around her, and we put together some defenses where we'd specifically put a gender mismatch on her just to try and eliminate her impact on the offensive line for Colombia. I think she's the heartbeat of that Colombian O-line, and she had a stellar tournament and played super well. So yeah, they're two standouts for me. Probably Jack Williams as well. I think I didn't see what he was doing earlier on in the tournament, but I think from that German loss afterwards, like he really came into his own and was pretty much untouchable in terms of like being a triple threat out there, so dominant in that handler give-go space. But then if you put someone a little bit shorter on him, he's so comfortable just going to the end zone and can like compete with the best of them in the skies. So I think he had a pretty stellar tournament as well.
Well, Tom, thank you so much for taking some time, and we'll look forward to seeing you out there in Cincinnati.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
All right, Tom Tulett from Team Australia and Melbourne Ellipsis, not Sunder. Get it right, Charlie. Thanks, Tom.
No worries at all.
Welcome back to Deep Look. It's time to dig into some listener mail. Mailbag segment. We've got so many questions to get to. Keith, I'll let you dip into the mailbag and pull out the first letter.
All right, let's go to this one from Willis and Joel on Twitter. What non-USA player would you want on the USA team? Offense, defense, overall. I don't know if that's saying consider all of those things in one pick or pick one for each of those. I think probably pick one.
Now, question, is this assuming they're cloned? As in, if I take them from the other team,
they're still on the other team?
Are they taken off the other team?
Let's assume they're cloned. Because
that would change the answer potentially, because you want to like maybe snipe the other team's best player, you know?
Yeah, Tom Tulett's just...
Who do I think that they would have liked to have had? What was the U.S.? What do you think the U.S. was missing, Keith?
I think that they could have used another female matching thrower.
Yeah, Valeria was the first person
player
that went into my mind.
Valeria is also the person I would take on that front for offense.
Honestly, though, like also McGuckin or Andrews from Australia, like another big. I thought Nate Goff played really well, but they could have used. I think Andrews is a good.
They
could have used somebody to just go down there and just be a goon in the deep space. Like they didn't. How many times did they huck to Goff for scores? Like a couple times, but I mean, Australia having that in their back pocket was like a big deal, and I think he would have been very useful offensively. You could have let Goff play more D points. I know the U.S. didn't really play O and D. Pretty evenly split across the whole thing. I'm not actually sure that I liked that strategy very much. Like, I've got to be perfectly honest. Like, there are certain players who I think should have only played O or only played D points, and they probably would have been better off for it, but that's not how they chose to do it.
No, they did not. We have another mailbag question about that, so maybe we'll get to that in a little bit.
Okay. So anyway, yeah, I think Valeria is probably my number one answer.
Yeah, I think I like the Valeria Andrews combo. I could see Valeria and Conrad Schlor.
Well, if you're looking for a defender, I mean, he was unreal.
Breedy, but yeah, he was fantastic. So those are two that come to mind for me.
Okay, let's see. I'm gonna pick one here. Oh, there was a lot of conversation about this. Views on spiking around the world. This one comes from January14. Do we need to start shipping discs across the world so internationals can spike after a score?
I have a rant on this topic, but do you want to go first?
No, please. Let's get your thoughts.
All right, so for those who are not plugged into the social media sphere or whatnot, this is in reference to a comment by one of the commenters that a repeated series of comments about anti-spiking and somewhat tongue-in-cheek because there's like a limited supply of discs. Like we don't want to destroy all the discs. And everybody's been making fun of her for that comment online. And I get that everybody's like, we're just having a good time or whatever, but like, you don't know what other people's experience is. I know here in like the US and Canada, like discs are just, you just get as many discs as you want, right? But that's not necessarily the case for everybody. And so there may actually be some truth to the idea that, oh, we literally only have 1 or 2 discs. You could end up in a Sandlot situation where, you got to go find the extra disc just to keep playing. Like that's a real thing that could happen somewhere elsewhere other than some of the privileged places that the communities that play here. But also, like, she was kidding. I don't know why we've gone off on a tail on this. All that said, I disagree with her on her anti-spiking message, but it really sparked some war in the social media commentary. Our Instagram comments were ablaze with the anti-spiking versus pro-spiking crowd.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know exactly when these comments surfaced, like what kind of spike led to the discussion. I have no problem with spiking. Zero. None. Do not care. Spike all you want. I think it's fun if you come up with clever ways to do spikes. But there are moments out there where I feel like the spiking crosses the line from being like a celebratory move to being like aggro in your face, directed towards the opponent, which I think crosses a line. And I think there were times this weekend where specifically Dylan Freechild went across that line and like really pissed off the other team. The U.S. finished dead last in spirit scores at this tournament. Is that in direct correlation to this kind of spiking behavior? It's not the spiking specifically, right? If I go over there and I spike the disc by myself in the corner because I'm pumped up, I don't think anybody cares about that. Certainly not the players at this level. But when you spike it after kind of doing a little bit of a stare down and maybe giving some words to your opponent, yes, that is going to aggravate people. To me, those are different things, right? There is celebration and then there is like taunting. And I think that there is a line between those things. I don't think anybody would say it's okay for you to spike it and like spike it on an opponent, right? No one would say that was like cool.
Physically hit
right?
somebody.
That's
with
not cool.
Yeah.
But like, so then what's cool? I don't know. There's a boundary there. Now, I don't have no idea. I wasn't watching the stream, so I don't know when this discussion took place. So I don't really have any like, I don't feel one way or the other about the comments from the commentators. But my point is
also
that
anti-disc destroying. Like,
yeah, but
is anybody for that?
No one's destroying discs. Like it's not happening. It would really take an effort to destroy a disc with an edge down spike. So to me, spike all you want, but don't taunt and don't be so aggressive that you're angering the opponent for no reason. Like to me, that's unnecessary behavior.
I think people would say it's unspirited, which I guess you kind of hinted at. Let's just roll right into this question because you brought it up. What's the takeaway from USA finishing last in spirit and not having good scores in the categories of foul/body contact, attitude/self-control, and communication? With USA Ultimate always seemingly emphasizing spirit and its importance, this seems to say it doesn't matter for our best when playing in the biggest games. That comes from NC Wool 31.
I think generally something like, let's talk about attitude first, right? Single players can cause bad scores in that category. Let's just be honest. Like Dylan, the way that he plays is not a particularly positive attitude towards the opponent. That's how he plays. You either like it or you don't like it. I think it's great television. I also don't necessarily, like if I was on the field, I would probably be pissed. Okay. So body control and fouls, North Americans play a more physical style than a lot of other countries or continental players, I guess. Like, it's plausible to me that people didn't like the amount of physicality that the U.S. played with because it's just a different level of, forearm checking and jostling typically in the United States compared to these other countries. But that said, I don't really feel like I saw major problems I feel like that a lot of times the spirit score stuff is very noisy and random. Like somebody's making a call at the end of the game. And when you have somebody who's like exacerbating an already tense game by like being super aggressive or like screaming about how, at one point I heard Dylan screaming like, they can't fucking hang with us, like really loud right in front of the opponents, which, you know what, again, like that's Dylan, like that's how he's going to get pumped up. That's how he's trying to pump up the team. But that is inflammatory towards the other team. And so like those kinds of things are going to yield bad spirit scores. Now, here's the thing. The US played more fair than a lot of other teams. They played more fair. They didn't make bad calls very much. I think that they didn't like try to call ticky-tack travels or phantom fouls. We saw other teams do that. To me, there's a big difference between these things, right? And I don't really like to equate them. There's like an attitude element of like, are you being like cool to your opponent? And then there's like, are you playing the game fair? And I care a lot more about that second category. I think the US really acquitted themselves well. Sure, there were some calls here and there that maybe you quibble with, but for the most part, like borderline calls, they were like letting those go. They weren't calling ticky-tack stuff. And so I think that, the US did fine on that front. But
I can't think of a single like overly dangerous play that I recall the US making, and that could be my own biases. I'll recognize that. But I can recall some made by other teams. So like, I feel like other teams were more dangerous and potentially injurious than the US in most cases. But yeah, I'll let you finish your point before I don't
have more. I think that a lot of times spirit scores come down to like, how did the other team make me feel? And I think a lot of times the US team did not make other teams feel that they were being treated with respect. That's how I'll put it.
There was quite a bit of conversation on this topic in our Discord as well, and my viewpoint kind of lines up with some of the issues that were going on in that conversation, which is that in the U.S. In North America, I think spirit scoring is done poorly, and so we all think of the system as pretty much a joke. Like we don't do it well, so no one takes the time to do it well. It doesn't feel important. It doesn't feel meaningful. We stink with it. So. I feel like it feels like a silly system to us, but that's not necessarily the case. What I gather, particularly for European players, but for a lot of the international community, they take the spirit scoring seriously, and they're a lot more thoughtful about it than we are in the US, and they try and do it the right way and communicate feedback effectively through that system. So, while most of the time I would kind of shrug off a bad spirit score, unless there were like clear things to go with it that were like, oh, well, this is where this came from. I'm not necessarily willing to do that when the feedback is coming from folks who I think are pretty adept in using the system effectively. So, it's tough to square like who's missing the mark here, the US or potentially folks using the scoring system. But I do think it's a little concerning. I know it's something I have to imagine USA Ultimate is going to look at it. The team and the coaches are going to look at it. If the team has like a spirit captain, they'll be considering this and communicating with the team, I imagine, about, why are we perceived this way? What can we do about it? But I agree with you that in some of the stuff that like does bother me, dangerous plays being probably number one, but also like unfair play. Like I feel like the US did very well in those categories.
Right. Here's one that's kind of fun and open-ended. Top 3 things that you would change at this tournament and the top 3 things that were good that we need to keep. This is from Lucas.
Oh, well, I'm going to steal some from you. I feel like this is really your question to answer because you're going to be there. So you're going to have the best perspective, but things you would change. I mean, we cannot cap these games. These games cannot be capped. That's awful. It shouldn't happen.
Very few games were actually capped, Keith. I can only remember one game.
But it shouldn't happen in any way. But also games to 13. I think I am very much in favor of games to 15, particularly the later bracket games, probably all of them. And if that necessitates expanding the rosters to 16, I'm also cool with that. I think that would be a great change. I don't want to get too far into the game advisor stuff. I know we have other questions about that too. So I don't want to get too far into that. I mean, I guess making the change to the bracket of having the 2-3 teams play into semis to add an extra round of play, I think I'd be open to that too. So those are things that I think we should change. We should keep 8 teams, much better than 6.
Loved 8 teams.
Clearly, the ability of the teams is at that level. We should definitely keep that. What else was I mean, some of the stuff is good. Like, it's just like the level of play was extremely high. Well, we should keep doing a great job broadcasting every game. They should not, no game should be happening concurrently. Like, we should definitely keep that.
Yeah, I love that. I love the general format. I'm not even sold that you necessarily need to have crossover games. I mean, I understand that it like increases the there's trade-offs. The benefit, seeding matters less. The cost is that pool play games feel less important because everybody's getting in.
But even as is, like, elimination games were where it was at. Like, by the time US played Canada, what was a de facto elimination game, like the stakes were high. And like, I'm okay with adding more games where there's high
It
stakes.
also adds an extra game for,
that's true,
you know, the 2 and 3 teams versus get the 1 seed getting a bye. I'm not sure I like that asymmetry in a tournament of this stakes. And, you know, I think in a normal year where seeding is determined by the actual performance at the World Championships and not by what happened 5 years ago, that would feel better. Versus here where, you know, did somebody get screwed? I don't really think so. I think the 4 best teams made the bracket. So I'm not sure that I'm too concerned about the teams that didn't make the bracket, but I at least understand the argument. Things that are good that we need to keep. It was great to have a venue for Flying Disc that was all for Flying Disc. I thought that was really neat. I'm not sure that's something that you could like mandate, like that's a World Games decision, but that was really cool. I think you want to keep the overall schedule, not just games being played one at a time, but having a big break in the middle of the day during the heat of the day. Like, there's just no reason to play games at that time. You have these nice morning session games when it's cooler. Then you take time off in the middle of the day. People can go have lunch. They can relax. They can take a nap, whatever. And then you have evening session games where it's easier for fans to come out. Like, I think that's the best. I think more
tournaments
should do this.
Was there any grumbling for teams that had to play the late session and then the morning session back to back?
I didn't hear it. I could understand if it would be a little annoying if you played at 6 and then 9 a.m. the next day, but that's an easy thing to avoid too, I think. So
also thing I forgot to say for good, we should keep the gender ratio and particularly pulling.
Yes, I love that.
I've been a full-throated advocate for this pulling rule since it was introduced to me. I love it.
All right, I'm gonna ask this question as well, Keith, and then maybe I want you to answer it and then I'll answer, because I just said that I thought the U.S. should have had more players that played more specifically on one line. But this question comes from Walk. He says, I think the U.S. not going OD was a structural advantage, especially in the way it didn't let other teams get comfortable with playing against a specific matchup. Can you speak to who was tasked with what sort of defensive assignments on the U.S. lines and where the U.S. had success on defense once their D ramped up in the second half of the Germany game and beyond?
Yeah, I mean, there were some interesting matchups. You know, it's a threat assessment for a lot of the teams, but I think it was clear that trying to choke off the handlers was a big part, particularly of the teams that the U.S. played late. And it seemed like they had some mixed up matchups for a little while. You know, it seemed like they really wanted to guard Tom Tulett with Chris Kocher, potentially not only because of Kocher's ability, but also because of the familiarity, having played a season together, which was also the same strategy that they went with against Manu Cardenas, having Claire Chastain guard her. So I think that there was certainly a like, okay, I know this person well, let me match up with them kind of thought process that was going on for both those matchups. But Kocher was not also at full health. I think that probably Khalif El Salam did the best handler defense for the male matching players, which came up big both against Australia for Tom Tulett and against Germany for Nico Mueller. Those players were really driving offense for those respective teams. Claire Trope was obviously taking on whoever the most athletic cutter was, particularly in the deep space. For female matching players, same kind of for Nate Goff on the other end. You kind of have to figure out, where do we put Jimmy? Whenever he was on defense, you get his tremendous pulls. You get him after the turn. But I do think it was clear that he was the weakest defender on the team, and the one that you could take the most advantage of. And I think we saw some teams go after that when they could. Not that he's a bad defender, but just that the level is so high that if you're not a great defender,
it's not even that he's a bad defender. He's just not fast. He could hang with faster, younger, more athletic players. Like he was getting beat by 10 yards sometimes.
Yeah, a lot of it was quickness. It was just like somebody getting away from him that caused some trouble. So it's an interesting thing, the OD questions. It's something we talked about in some of our live recordings that we're doing in Discord during the tournament, but also like that this is a Matty Sang special. This is like kind of what he does. So it's weird because you then have to design your lines with the versatility of like on all these different axes. If you're just building an O line, you're just kind of thinking about the O rolls and then maybe a little bit about making sure that you have your bases covered on defense. But here, that line has to have the right offensive roles, also have the right defensive roles. Then you have to do that again for a separate line. Like, how does that negate? What do you do if there's an injury? Like what we had to Kocher. Like, then you have your gender ratio. Who's flexing and how are we deciding when to move them over? Like, what happens if they play a really long point and they can't play a second straight point? Like all of those things are things that you have to think about when you have these lines where everybody's playing both directions.
I just think I'm okay with not necessarily having strict OD, but there were players on the team that clearly should play D points always, like Khalif, and there were players who should only play O points, like Jimmy. And I think that you should, I would have liked to seen the coaching staff help develop a more offensive rhythm because I don't know that they ever found it. I'm not sure that we ever saw like just super crisp, clean U.S. offense the whole tournament. Yes, they got the job done. But I think they won this tournament because their defense was so good. And their offense gave up breaks down the stretch in every single game. They almost lost to Australia. If that one turnover had at 10-10 had gone in for an Australia break, that might have been it. It really might have been it. Colombia came charging back because the U.S. offense was not really that good ever. Now, that good. These are amazing players. They had some amazing points. They started to be more willing to grind and stop trying to make the hero shots that we saw a lot of in the Germany game. But I don't think we saw the U.S. offense really executing at a super high level over the course of an entire game at any point in this tournament. And I don't know for sure that an O-line would have helped, but I think it would have helped. So I understand the point that Walk makes that it was less predictable, but I also think it made it less predictable for the players on the U.S. team. Look at the efficiency we saw from Australia's O-line. Same thing every time. Tulett centering pass, stares at the disc for 3 seconds, looks up, boom, they go to work. And they had a lot of beautiful holds. A lot. And yes, they lost to the U.S. because the U.S. was able to get enough turns out of that O-line. But I'm not sure that we ever saw truly great offense from the U.S. over the course of an entire game. And I think we did from Australia and Colombia. I mean, Colombia had whole games where they almost didn't turn it over. So that's my take.
I also think you get like it using the versatility of your players is like a strength of the U.S. Like I think that's true. Some of the other rosters that we saw, their players were a little less versatile. That they were still strong, but more concentrated in given specific skills. And one of the ways to press your advantage on the U.S. is to say like, well, we have 10 players who can do a bit of everything. So even if we don't quite have the best handler in the world or the best deep cutter in the world, we can make up for that by having a ton of flexibility. So I think that's something maybe that the U.S. was trying to do, is to take advantage of
and
that.
I think you saw that from their D lines. Like whatever the line was on the field, they were able to create pressure consistently when they got to that point in the tournament. And when they got the turnover, they were just ripping other O-lines to shreds. They were getting breaks, super efficient break performances. I mean, do we have those numbers, Keith? Like, I just feel like anytime they got the rock, they would convert a break. U.S. went 3 for 5 against Colombia, so that's 60%.
They went 4 for 5.
It's a very good number.
Against Australia, 80%.
4 for 5. Like those are elite numbers, and I think that speaks to that versatility, that they were able to put really strong defensive players out on the line who could then turn around and play great offense. I mean, some of the best offense I feel like I saw from the U.S. was after a turnover with the D-line on the field.
Yeah, I mean that's when your D line is your O line.
Right.
That's how it can work.
That's how it always works, in fact. All right, you got something, Keith?
All right. Yeah, here's one. Did anyone actually expect any other team to take gold? That's from Stall One Hammer. Do you think there was, at any point, was another team the favorite, or do you really think that there was another contender that the public favored some other teams, or did it always feel like it might be the U.S.?
I mean, look, I picked Colombia for the tournament. I picked Colombia before the semifinal. You had the Colombia as a 1.5 point favorite against the U.S. in the semifinal. I think it's, I think if you want to argue that they never should have been considered, that the U.S. should have always been considered the favorite, I think that's fine. But I think it also ignores the game data we got from the Germany game, where they looked terrible. So I do think, like, they were always the favorite, like, coming into the event. Of course they were. And I think that even in that matchup with Colombia, you could argue that they should have been at most a coin flip, a pick 'em. But I truly do think that they, could have lost, that it could have been another team. And I think that the results of this tournament show you that. I mean, you got to give the team credit, right? They gritted it out, and they were able to come away with, just the one loss, and then they had 2-point wins in semis and finals, both in games where, had they been to games to 15, it would have been a little scary for the U.S. down the stretch. Speaks to wanting to have games to 15, Keith.
I agree, and I agree with you that like, to act like this was an inevitable outcome feels a little foolish given what we saw.
Is there an avenue for actual/better VAR? That's the I forget what it stands for. Video
something replay?
Assist referee or something like that. It's what they use in soccer to review plays, goal scoring opportunities, etc. Is there an avenue for actual better VAR in USAU or WIFDIF games after the Khalif cell phone replay play? It at least provided more perspective for the players on the field. Khalif was filming from his cell phone before they were going to score the game winner in the Colombia semifinal, and had a perfect angle of Nate Goff going up for the disc and getting bumped into by the Colombian defender, which forced him out of bounds. Now, there's been a lot of discussion of, like, was Goff going to be able to make the play? Even if there was no contact, could he have gotten his foot down in bounds? At the end of the day, you have to call a force out there because you don't know. And Khalif provided evidence, clear video evidence that supported that. And upon seeing that, the Colombian player immediately said, force out your disc. And Goff had the disc, 5-10 yards outside the end zone.
That was Jack.
It was Jack?
Yeah.
I'm
Jack.
misremembering. Thank you for the correction. Jack Williams on the sideline. Jack was just playing so in the air that he looked like Goff. What a weekend for Jack Williams. Keith, I mean, I'll let you take this on. Do you think that there needs to be something better? Because there's already rules for this in the book.
Right. This does already exist, and I imagine that most people aren't aware of it because it doesn't come up very often. There's very few opportunities for it to be put into use. Charlie and I, I'm sure, both remember it occurring at the last WCC, where there was a big video replay board on the showcase field, and players would occasionally wait to see the replay if they were unsure about a call. Like they would just look over at the video board that was just showing the live stream. And so it was a little bit behind, but if you just waited a little bit, you would get the replay. There is, but we've seen this happen before. We've seen people go to the sideline to look at a photo or a video or whatever. There is place for that. But it's hard for me to think of like a more robust implementation of it, because so infrequently do you have access to this to make it like a blanket rule. But also, like, I don't know,
hate that argument.
Do we need more? Is it a thing that we're missing right now?
I hate that argument that, like, because we can't do it for all the games, we shouldn't do it for any of the games. It's a terrible argument. It needs to die. When we have big international tournaments like this one, or we're at USAU Club Nationals or whatever, and we have video, we should take advantage of it. Now, I will tell you this. There was a video board at the World Games that was being supplied video from both our production team and then the tournament production team when they took over for semis and finals. The thing is, the video board replay operators, whoever is running the video board, generally only showed video on the board in between points after scores. So they weren't showing the plays and the replays that were happening in these call situations. And I actually don't remember, did they show the replay of the force out on the stream? I don't remember if they did or not.
I believe they did, but from, the wide angle.
They didn't really have a camera over there where Khalif was filming.
Right.
At the end of the day, I think it would be great to create opportunities for an actual video review. I think this makes more sense in USAU, where we have observers who are making binding rulings, and just get a monitor down the sidelines. It wouldn't have to take a long time.
Wait. Are you sure about that last part? I mean, you are Mr. Games are too slow, and this is the thing people seem to hate
about pro sports,
about major American sports, is basketball. Like, as an NBA fan, basketball is like inundated with lengthy reviews. NFL and college football games suffer from the same problem. People in soccer hate VAR. I've had people go so far as to say, like, I would rather they get the call wrong than spend all this time looking for these perfect, specific evidence of the truth. Like, I would rather they get it wrong and we move on than have them go through and find like every little detail. It's like not even in the spirit of the game. So, like, are you sure that you want to introduce this potentially lengthy
Pandora's
problem?
Box? I think that it should be done like tennis, where you have a set number of replay calls, and it should be done quickly. Now, the thing is, if you have a monitor down the sideline, it doesn't take very long, because you just have the observer go over and take a look at it, or even have the players go over and take a look at it, and then you make a call. Boom.
We can't do
be
stuff
slower
as is
than the
fast.
discussions that we had to endure this weekend at the World Games.
But it's not going to be slower. It's going to be in addition to those conversations.
I don't know. I hear you. I think we just need Leaf there to film.
Yes, Leaf is on it. All right. So I'll tackle this one very quickly because I have a potential answer. Someone asked about Claire Chastain's jersey. She was wearing the Rafi Hayes jersey. I was told that she actually tore her jersey, and Rafi's jersey was the best physical fit for her. So we'll just knock that one out real quick.
I separately heard, which shows you how much like sort of like swirling stuff there is about the jersey situation, which stay tuned for an article, that it was too small. So I don't know the answer either way.
We'll see. Those two things definitely seem like they could go together. Yeah, you would tear a jersey that's too small, right? Like,
yes, that's
tracks.
a good point.
Okay. Another one that I'll quickly address from Julia Furia about me eating my words about questioning Khalif and Mexstroff, which is not how you spell that, but for making the team. I tweeted like Khalif backed it up, made me look dumb for saying that we were surprised by his pick. Mexstroff also played super well. So impressive performances by both players. Will it lead to like more players from the mixed division being on the team? Like, does that help enhance your skill set? That part is unclear to me currently. I don't know that I necessarily like felt like those players played well because they played in the mixed division, but it's so hard to untangle like why that was. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't feel like the US was like particularly extra proficient playing cross gender or something, or that the single gender players were. But you also like, it's hard to know about how players are cutting and there's such a spacing and stuff. So tough to
keep
say.
In mind that most of these other countries, like the top players are all playing single gender. Like many of them don't play mixed almost at all. That's not true across the board. Like they have a mixed season in some countries, like Australia, they have a whole mixed season. But a lot of countries like the US team probably has more overall mixed playing experience than many of the other countries. Look, at the end of the day, like I think you saw that like players like Sarah Meckstroth has been an absolute beast at any level at which she has played. I mean, she silenced any questions about whether she's like a super elite player that could hang at the top level. We'd already seen that in the pro leagues.
I don't think either of us at the time said that Meckstroth was like a surprise to make the team. Of course, I said
Khalif was a surprise, and I still think Khalif was a surprise selection. Now, that said, I also think Khalif did exactly what he was brought in to do, which was play tremendous defense. I also think it really helped to have him with the confidence that he was playing with on the field. In the final specifically, he hit a couple of tough throw assists to score breaks. I can't remember if they were breaks or holds, to be honest.
I know he hit the outside in forehand to Meckstroth.
Yes.
That got called back for an offensive foul. I know exactly the throw.
But I think it was important to have somebody out there who was like willing to take the shot, because there was a lot of hesitance from a lot of US players not to make a mistake early in that game. And I thought that was really important for him. And I thought he played excellent handler defense the whole tournament.
And I thought he was strong in the red zone, and he had 2 turnovers in the entire tournament, and I can think of both of them. One of them was a red zone turnover to Claire Chastain, where Claire looked like she was going to go backwards, and then she went up the field. So it was more a miscommunication turnover, but I'll always put those on the thrower because it's the thrower's job to not release the disc until they're sure of where it's going. But the other one was the mistuck to Kayla Helton, which... the cut maybe could have been better, but like he knows he's got to hit that. I mean, it's wide open, free score, and he missed it.
Speaking of Kayla Helton, how did this one comes from Simone Pierotti? I'm not sure if I'm getting that right. How did Ultiworld let Kayla Helton go under the radar for so long? I haven't seen her on any All-American team so far, and yet she is one of the most decorated players in history.
Ultiworld, hey, she's tried out for the World Games team twice and not made it. So it wasn't just us. But we did. She has never won an Ultiworld award. I'm sure she would have won a college award had we had awards when she was absolutely crushing for UC Santa Barbara. Definitely would have, like, I think I've thought about doing a reverse engineering of who would have won Player of the Year before Ultiworld existed. And like, I feel pretty confident she would have had a Player of the Year. Did just win our Western Ultimate League MVP, although that was it was after her World Games selection. But here's the answer to the question. I've called it this for all time, and Helton is like one of the main examples. The Fury effect.
Yes.
There's like 9 all club level players playing on Fury at any given time, and it makes it really hard for one of them to stand out and for you to be like, okay, this is the one. It's always been a challenge for us. We've had a couple of examples where like Carolyn Finney won Player of the Year. So that to me is the biggest thing. Is Kayla Helton has played on fantastic teams, and part of why she's really like, she's a decorated player because she's been on Fury. Like when you're on Fury, you get a giant resume of incredible stuff. And if you're good on Fury, you're contributing to why you have a huge resume of incredible stuff. Helton's had a hell of a career, and I think that she's been over the past year really boosted into a bigger public position, which is exciting for her. And, I think it's allowing people to recognize her.
I think there's a couple of things. One, I think she's playing the best Ultimate that she's ever played right now.
I agree.
Number 2, I think it helped that she played on a Western Ultimate League team where she was one of the best players very clearly on the team, as opposed to being, honestly, a lot of her career, a middle of the pack player on Fury. And maybe people will take exception with that, but like, there's a lot of really good players on Fury. There's a lot of big names on Fury. And especially if you're a D-line kind of grinder like Kayla is, you're not necessarily going to be noticed at the high level. I don't think anybody ever questioned her bona fides as a great player, but I think that it's just hard to stand out in that role. And when her role changed, that helped. But I also think that she's playing amazing Ultimate right now in her career. And, I think she did. She was the perfect fit for this team. I think there were some players who were trying to do too much at points. That was not Kayla. It's like, just go get huge Ds and just like be reliable. And like, honestly, the U.S. could have probably used one or two more of those players.
I think if the U.S. was picking O and D lines going into tryouts, like I'm not as confident that Kayla makes the team.
Interesting point.
I think that this having a two-way player who's got mixed experience, who is a fantastic athlete with great endurance, is going to be great in this format. Like I think she's a great fit for what this team needed, and to played a very strong tournament. All
right, well that's going to do it for our mailbag segment, but we've got many more mailbag questions to get to in our subscriber-only bonus segment Out the Back. So we hope you'll join us for that, including our way too early picks for the World Games Team USA in 2025 in Chengdu, China.
Oh, and we're gonna do Team USA MVP because I gotta ask Charlie about that one.
Ooh, so we're gonna talk MVP for Team USA. So that will be in our Out the Back segment. You can become a subscriber for less than $4 a month. But I will say this. Now is the time to get yourself a full or plus subscription starting at $12.99, because not only will you get all of our subscriber-only articles, podcast segments, etc., you'll also get access to our entire video library, including all of our upcoming live streaming at the World Ultimate Club Championships. So all subscribers at the full or plus levels will get full access to the full live streaming slate from WUCC starting on Sunday and running through the entire week through to Saturday for the finals. And we're really excited to roll out some new features, some new stuff. We've got a great team of people, and we're just really excited to be able to bring you this coverage from Cincinnati. And again, that's available to all subscribers at the full and plus levels starting at $12.99 for a month. You can cancel anytime. So if you just want to watch WUCC, no problem. Sign up. You can cancel immediately. Just like on Amazon Prime, you get the full 30 days, no problem. So let us know if you have any questions, and then you can join us for our Out the Back segment where we pick our Team USA MVP, talk about the 2025 team, and there's a whole bunch more stuff, game advisors, and more. So we'll see you there. For Keith Raynor, I'm Charlie Eisenhood saying so long. Thanks for tuning in for this edition of Deep Look. We'll be back with you soon for our WUCC preview show, which will come out before the start of the event. So we're kind of going to have 2 episodes in 1 week. So that's fun. We'll see you then.